plan as much as you want for line, and you can plan as much for all the equipment, but quite frankly, sometimes even the most Frankensteins of setups will still catch you fish. Hover about a foot above where you think there are fish. Just giving you a setup for a troll or a cast. So you have obviously your main line. So that's either your float, sink, or intermediate. That's then followed up with a loop-to-loop connection. So typically tapered leaders. Depending on what you're targeting, what size you're looking for in terms of trout, or what you know is in the lake determines sort of what size of tapered leader you're going to be using. Sink tip alternatives is another one. So again, if you feel like you got stuck on a lake and you only have your float line, but you know that they're down deeper and you happen to have a sink line or a sink tip with you, then by all means, like, it can't hurt to get that in there. So sink tip alternative works really well too, if that's the only thing that you have. Then followed with some tippet, and that's usually connected with blood knot or a triple surgeon's knot. For me, I know there's a lot of different knots out there. I just know for myself and my nails, a blood knot or a triple surgeon's is usually the easiest for me to tie quickly so I can get the line back out into the water. And then I usually use a loop knot at the end to connect the fly because I want it to wiggle as much as possible. Otherwise, an improved clench knot also works really well. Setups, this is again possible. I put this in air quotes because this range is like crazy. But yeah, again, your main line. So typically it's a float line, or you can get, different brands use actual like indicator lines, which will already have sort of like a strike zone, like orange area. I don't find them any different than just using a float line personally. I use for my indicator fishing, I actually use an indicator specific rod. I don't change it at all so that the setup is always rigged and ready to go. My indicator rod normally is it's a 10.5. And I chose a 10-foot instead because I found that if it is sitting in a rod holder on the boat and we've anchored up, I just find it way easier being a shorter person with shorter arms that like the pickup helps me make sure that the hook set happens faster than if I were working with a 9. I think it's just a personal preference. You can do it with either size rod personally. Got your main line, which is float line typically, tapered leader. I'm using 3X because I'm, again, targeting fish that are over 5 pounds. And then, of course, you're normally going to add an indicator. This is normally adjusted so that the overall line is going to be able to hover about a foot above where you think there are fish, or you can confirm that there are fish, whether using fish finder, visual confirmation. Because, I mean, I've indicator fished in as shallow as like 5 feet of water and just done like 4 feet. So I've barely had tippet and then just dropped the line in with a little chronomid and had hits right away, because that's usually the most fun, because at least you know you're doing something right. The indicator you can adjust. So you might find that like you think you've got the right depth after you've set this down. Sometimes I'll add a little split shot just above the swivel just to help with the line being able to sink down faster. But like Aggie said, I agree. It's when you start adding split shots to line, things can get messy really fast. It's not my usual go-to unless I'm in wind or I'm concerned that my line just isn't able to sink down fast enough, especially if I am going to start using deeper chronomid depth fishing. Swivel is really important to the indicator fishing. I tend to not use a swivel because swivels help kind of buffer the movement of the chronomid or whatever, like balance leech that you're using underneath the indicator, because it'll help kind of let it look more naturally float and present itself to the fish. And then again, obviously tying the fly using a loop knot. I don't usually clench knot for indicator fishing. I want loop because I want it to float as naturally as possible.